webinar. Today's webinar is we have the honor to welcome 3 successful women that works in Israel with a Japanese market, within Japanese companies, working with. We invite them today to hear about the experience, to hear about how they got into the company, how they experienced the company as Israelis, and maybe we can learn something. I'm sure that for those that start their career path, it will be very useful to get as much information as possible. And for those that don't know much about us, so we are a group of women, Israeli Japanese Women Innovation Networks. We are a platform for women both from Japan and from Israel to promote their business, their social and cultural activities. We have a monthly webinar named Win-Win Webinar, and every month we tackle a different topic on the Israeli Japanese women arena. 1 month we do it in English and 1 month we do it in Japanese. For those that do not speak Japanese, it's a great opportunity to start to brush your Japanese. And for those Japanese that are not so fluent in English, this is a place where you can brush your English as well. We have ad hoc projects that we promote and support. We have our website, which I will link the URL at the chat box, and our social media. We within next month we'll start to promote our monthly newsletter, so you're more than welcome to bring up with ideas, registration, etc. And no further ado, I would like to introduce our 3 speakers today. I will go with my screen. So I will go with my screen order. If you don't mind, I would like to introduce first with Keren-Or Rosner. Keren-Or, she's the founder of Ray of Impact Sustainability Innovation SDG Advisor. Over the past decade, Keren-Or has dedicated her career to sustainability, social innovation, Israel-Japan business relations. Keren graduated from the Hebrew University and continued with her independent path since then. Second, we have on my screen order, we have Maytal Shavit. Maytal graduated from the Hebrew University, so a BA in International Relations and Psychology. Then she had a role of jobs in a different innovation arena, and now she is the business development, the manager at Sompo Digital Lab in Tel Aviv. And together with Maytal, we have Einav Margalit, who graduated from Bar-Ilan University. She had a very impressive CV, working as an office manager in different mobile companies, and nowadays she is the executive admin and operation at Sompo Digital Lab Tel Aviv and a community leader at the office. Thank you very much for joining us today and willing to share your experience with us. And I will start with for those who don't know me, my name is Hadass. I'm an IG Read member, as all of you. I live in Kyoto. I am a PhD candidate at Osaka University and a business developer and an entrepreneur, social entrepreneur. But that's the thing. Thank you very much for joining. So I will ask from you first to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your position, if it's in a Japanese company, or about your activities and how it's relate to Japan. I will start with Keren-Or, please.
Hi, so thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And actually, it's an honor to talk about Japan for me. I would say that I have several hats in this conversation. My past experience in the last 10 years was working with Japan after studying Japanese in the Hebrew University, and then I lived in South Japan in Fukuoka for a while studying Japanese. And when I came back, I had the privilege to lead the Israeli-Japan Chamber of Commerce, and working with a lot of Israeli-Japanese innovation and technologies. And after that, I was working with Yaskawa Denki, which is a global robotic corporation focusing on Industry 4.0 robotics, as well as human-oriented rehabilitation robotics, working with the elderly population. And in the last few years, I shifted or I expanded my expertise into working with sustainability technologies. Basically, the common ground is promoting well-being and promoting technologies for good. And today I work with Israeli startups and SMEs in climate, energy, water, gender, education, helping them to measure their impact and develop their market and create partnerships. So that's me in a nutshell, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. We continue with Maytal, please.
Hey everyone, again, thank you for the opportunity, Adas. It's a great honor to be here, and as Keren-Or said, and to speak about Japan. So I'm leading the business development activity in Sompo Digital Lab Tel Aviv, which is Sompo's innovation arm in Israel that was established 3 years ago. For those who don't know, Sompo is a global Japanese insurance company with operations in over 30 countries, with 80,000 employees, a giant. And we're not insurance people. We are a group of 6 members, and we focus on creating new businesses for Sompo beyond insurance. As Sompo's mission now is to expand its portfolio of services beyond insurance in mobility, agri-tech, digital health, smart cities. And this is our role here, to create these partnerships with Israeli startups. Prior to this position, I was working for the Israel Expert Institute, which is like JETRO, the Israeli JETRO. I was there responsible for the cyber sector, so I was more familiar with the cyber local ecosystem. And I was working with different commercial attaches around the world, including the one in Japan. So that was actually the first time that I became familiar with the Japanese market, getting to know different Japanese corporates, banks, IT companies, etc. I also led the Israeli delegation to the IT Week conference, to the national pavilion that the Israel Expert Institute was responsible for. And that was actually the first time I visited Japan and get to know the Japanese market. And this is how I end up in filling in this role. I was introduced to Sompo, and I started to work for Sompo 3 years ago. Maybe I answered the next question, but it was kind of related. So that's me. And just one maybe additional comment that in my current position, I lead the automotive and mobility and insurtech sectors, not the cyber.
Thank you very much, Maytal. Einav, please.
Hey everyone, thank you for having us. I'm working with Maytal at Sompo Digital Lab in Tel Aviv. I'm the operation manager. I do almost everything from accounting, welfare, connection with our team in Japan for all kind of things we need to do with them. I'm also helping sometimes to Maytal and the rest of the development team with finding new startups, setting meetings and introductions. It's a lot of things to do, but it's fun and great. And prior to that, I worked at Drive TLV. It's an innovation center in the smart mobility sector, owned by Mayer Group, if you know. And I'm also, it's not relevant to the Japanese market, but I'm a community leader. I am managing a community in a welfare and operation manager. And we do also like once a month webinars and events.
Thank you very much. Wow, very impressive. Both few of yours positions and occupations are very, very interesting. Thank you very much. Our next question, actually, there is two questions quite related to one another. So I will combine the two questions into one, and you can answer the parts that related to you. So modify the question the way you seems fits to your position. Did you had to have to educate the Israeli companies that work in relations with your company and how it's to work with the Japanese company? Is there any difference? You are located in Israel, and if how it works with the market. So do you have to educate the Israeli market to work with the Japanese company, and otherwise do you have to educate the Japanese market working with Israelis in a Japanese company? Let's start with you, Maytal.
Yeah, well, it's actually two questions. So I'll answer first for the first one. Yes, I think that we do educate the Israeli startups, and sometimes we even must. Usually the Japanese market is not startups' first market to get into. They usually focus on the American, the US market, the European market, and as the Asian market perceived as a tough market, especially the Japanese one, is a very conservative market. And it's true. I think it's also changing, but it's a process. So startups must know it before they enter the Japanese market. On the other hand, I do see some change, as I said before, while working in the previous position in the Israel Export Institute and also here in Sompo, there is a change towards more acceptance from Japanese corporates towards Israeli startups that usually work, they're more agile, they work fast, they want answers to be provided faster. And when we meet with startups that usually are sometimes even market leaders in the US market, and we providing them with the opportunity to enter the Japanese market with Sompo as a strategic partner, we don't have to convince them, but we have to show them the opportunity, the potential to enter this blue ocean sometimes. As go and target the US market is obvious, and this market is sometimes too crowded with too many competitors. So yes, we offer the Japanese market as an alternative, but not only as an alternative, rather than also as a huge market to grow in. Sompo is a global company, and when we meet with startups, we don't only expose them to the Japanese market, but also to the global market. Japanese are very loyal to companies, in contrast maybe to other Asian markets. And startups have a limited capacity. They don't want to waste their time. So even though the processes are sometimes very long, I think that Israelis appreciate very much the sincerity and loyalty of the Japanese partners. So that's how we frame it when we meet with startups. And and I do see the change. We see more and more startups that do look in the Japanese market, maybe not as their first market, but there is more also openness in the Israeli side.
Excellent, very, very interesting to see how the Israel is actually a mediator between so many markets, right?
Yeah, it's also more easier when there is some local presence in Israel, because for a startup to enter a Japanese market without any strategic partner, it's tough because of the language, the cultural differences, etc. And we are, as Israelis, it's easier to communicate and of course to take this idea forward. We're not mediators here in Israel. We follow, we escort the process from A to Z. But it's easier for startups to know that there are local presence here in Israel, and there are more and more Japanese corporates that have this presence in Israel, which is also a very positive sign for this change.
Very interesting. Keren-Or, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah. So basically, I would say that I started working with Japanese companies in 2014. So from 2014 until today, I see a big shift of interest of Japanese companies in Israel. And therefore, I think market education became easier. But that's just the gist of it. When I started working with Japan, I was working very rigorously to explain the Israeli startups and the Israeli ecosystem, the benefits of working with Japan. It was very clear for me that it's a long distance relationship, but a very loyal one. So when you work with Japan, it's really a challenge to build the trust and to build the relationship. But once you have the relationship and you have the trust, the door is open and you have a very long path to go together. And I think in 2015, there was the visit of Prime Minister Abe Shinzo here. And since then, until 2021, we see a big shift of Japanese companies investing in Israel, Rakuten and other companies, and healthcare and cyber. And today it's very obvious that there is a big capital, but Maytal, you mentioned the Export Institute. So when I was working with the Export Institute, we have the reports of Israeli trade amounts between Israel and Japan, and it was very low, to be honest. And I'm happy to see that today it became wider and bigger. I think the opportunities are expanding to healthcare and cyber, of course, but also to agri-tech and energy and mobility, which was a bit early in 2015. Regarding the question, I think Israel and Japan has an amazing synergy. Israelis are very sassy, very fast. They want things to happen now or tomorrow morning. And if you help them in opening the door to Japan or to Asia, usually they expect the business to have a benefit after 2 months or 3 months. But it's a market education to try to explain that when you work with Japan, first of all, it starts with your attitude. You have to understand that things are different there, and you have to have some curiosity and some humbleness to come with your own agenda and then listen to the other side. One of the things that was very meaningful for me when I was working in Yaskawa, the Japanese robotic company that is still active in Israel, is that they were a company 102 years old. They were celebrating 102 years of activity. And our CEO, Arik Dan, came back from Japan and shared with us that they planned the 100 years, and it was kind of a recap. And then they forecasted the next 100 years. And from then, they asked all the CEOs in all of the 30 branches worldwide to build their own strategy for the next 50 years, and then for the next 25 years, and then for the next 5 years. And I remember the boom in my brain, trying to understand how can we build a strategy for 25 years? We are Israelis, we are disruptive, we move fast, we break things, but how can we build such a long strategy? And I think since then, I understood the main point of when you work with Japan, of course, you have to have some success, as Maytal mentioned. If you have a previous success in the UK or in the US, it's a big profit, and it can support you. But besides that, you have to come with your ego and with your curiosity and with humbleness. And if that's present, then I think everything is possible.
Thank you very, very much. Einav, maybe you can tell us from an office cultural perspective.
So I'll add to what Maytal and Keren said. When I work about the change that we see, I even see it from my previous position, which was just last year to now. We used to have at Drive TLV a lot of visitors from Japan, and we did a lot of meetings with the Japanese consul, with visitors from different corporations in Japan. And you see even in a year the difference that they used to listen and then disappear. Like they used to come to visit or to meet startups, or didn't want to meet certain startups, even though we thought it can be profitable for them. And now there's more, awareness and more openness to, even if a certain startup wasn't in their case study or their priority, they will listen more and take our advice sometimes and meet them. And also, and I'll add to what Keren said about, the difference in behaviors. We do need to sometimes remind the startups, with all their chutzpah and the sexiness, to also take a second and to just breathe in and listen, like Keren said, and answer directly, answer, don't say we have this thing like it will be okay, it will be okay. No, you can say it's not okay or it's not working. Just give, straight answer and don't bullshit, because we'll figure it out. They'll figure it out. And we also need sometimes to remind our partners in Japan to, because sometimes we'll be in a meeting and they'll be like quiet, just silence, and you won't know what they think, what they want to answer something, they want to ask something. So we need to educate both, and we need to find a way to not, insult anyone, and just like we're like, I was thinking about it the other day, we're like a captain on a boat, like trying to navigate between how Japanese people and corporations behave or want to hear, and how Israeli startups or people that after the army and have like this crazy idea, like behave.
Thank you so much. As living in Japan around this environment daily, not just the business environment, but everyday life, right? And sometimes you forget those basics. And it's a good reminder, especially as an entrepreneur, not working in a company, but working with herself, with many environments, Israelis and Japanese. A good reminder. Thank you very much. So for our next question, someone asked is, how about the dress code? So as you know, in Japan, every March, everyone dressed the same, trench coat, suits, And this is when they go into their interviews for job hunting, and everyone wear exactly the same. The same high heels, the same skirt, the same blazer, the same coat. And going for your office for the first year or two, you wear exactly the same uniforms, even though it's a free dress code. It's a very clear dress code. You can find those suits in Uniqlo everywhere, and people will exactly the same. They will tie the hair the same and probably use more or less the same colors of makeup. How is this experience for you, Maytal and Einav, working in an office, and Keren-Or for you, when you meet up with the Japanese clients? So let's start with Maytal and Einav. Einav, do you want to start first?
I think that this whole COVID year changed a little bit everything, because even Japan now, they're still in lockdown and they're working from home. So you see them and us in our natural environment, in our home with, kids all over the place, and, mess, or with a virtual background so no one will see the mess. And so I think it changed. I haven't got the chance to be in Japan yet, so I didn't feel it much. And in our office, we have pretty, easygoing. We don't have dress code, so we just want whatever comfortable and, respectable.
Yeah, to join it, we don't really feel the Japanese dress code even before COVID-19. When we first established our lab, we hosted so many Japanese members from Sompo. It was like maybe 5 visits per month. So they did came with their suits and everything. Most of them were men, and we just dressed as usual. Like, of course, we didn't wear a t-shirt as we do today via Zoom, but normally, we're not Japanese, and we don't have a dress code here, especially in Tel Aviv, in the high-tech scene. Like, you can wear jeans and a nice shirt with jeans, and it's okay with sneakers even. So I felt very comfortable when we hosted members from Sompo to dress like in between, but not because they're Japanese. Even if it was a Korean or, I don't know, a French corporate, I would have dressed the same. And I think that actually the Japanese are changing their dress code as well. When they come to Israel, they feel more free. They feel more, without the normal and strict framework maybe of dressing up. And they wear even t-shirt and sneakers to their meetings with startups. They're away from home and they feel more relaxed and calm and everything. So it's nice to see how they kind of come towards us. And it's also, of course, a sign for this openness that expands more.
I think it's a way to respect your culture, right? So beside the fact probably it's much more fun with the Tel Aviv summer, but I guess it's showing that they know your culture too, and I wanted to give them this guidance before they arrive. Keren, how this experience for you?
So I think, first of all, I wear a jacket now because I feel that maybe people are watching us, and maybe it can be a sign of respect. But that's just me because I was living in Japan, and I think I'm a half Japanese in mentality, the way I kind of try to give the respect. But I would kind of relate to what was mentioned. I think it depends on the context, the answer of the dress code. If you have a conference where you come to a Japanese business arena, or you come to a meeting, or you want a Japanese investor or a corporate to have a strategic cooperation with you, whether you're a startup or a youth or an entrepreneur or a woman. I think it's important to understand the context. And when you understand the context, you can read the situation. So if you have a formal meeting where you have a desired outcome and you wish to come to their own playground, so wear their own code. And if you're an Israeli coming to Japan, I would recommend you to have a blazer so that you can feel connected and respectful. But of course, if you are in Israel and you meet with Japanese companies, I think, of course, it depends on the context. If it's a first time meeting, I would recommend a nice kind of a button shirt. It doesn't have to be a blazer, but yes, something, maybe not a t-shirt with an army sign, but yes, something that is kind of a semi-formal. And if it's a easygoing after work hours and you go to a pub, so you can wear whatever you wish. But I think the dress code is just the expression of something that I experienced a lot in Japan. The difference between the home, the uchi, and the soto, the outside. And when you're at home with your family, with your friends, and you go to an izakaya and you drink, wear whatever you want. But when you're outside and you wish someone to connect with you and you wish some desired outcome, so you're in the soto and you need to play by the code, basically, if you want people to cooperate with you. So I think the added value of women is that we can be a little bit more flexible than men. We can, of course, play in the arena of wearing a blazer, or wearing just a shirt, or wearing something that is very loose. And taking in mind that if we're in Japan, we have to ask. That's the best tip, to ask before the meeting what is the best option for the dress code, and then they will say semi-formal, formal, just a suit, with a tie, without a tie, and then I think it's the best way to go.
I think in this respect, the right phrase in Japanese will be kuki o yomeru, to be able to read the atmosphere. So
exactly.
It's vice versa, right? The Japanese that come to Israel read the atmosphere, understand that everyone's much more relaxed, much more loose. It's
okay. And the first day they will wear their most fancy jacket, but the day after they will wear t-shirt, as they understand it. They're meeting with startups. Everything is, very very fun and more relaxed in meeting startups. So that's what I think, and actually I love it. I don't believe that the jacket says a lot beyond respect, and of course it's very important.
Just don't forget when you come to Japan, right? And if you do,
probably your next question, so I keep it.
Just jump to the first Uniqlo you find, and you can buy your jacket. Our next question is: did you travel to Japan? And if so, what was the experience visiting the headquarters?
That's sorry, someone is asking in the chat about the Zoom, how to dress to a Zoom call.
Yeah, so what would you wear for a Zoom call?
I think it's like for any other Zoom call. It doesn't matter if it's a Japanese client or, again, a French one. It's nice to wear something which is less casual and more dressy. The underneath doesn't matter. You can wear a skirt, a pants, shorts. It doesn't really matter.
No one sees your pants if you're in Zoom. So
actually, I'm fancy here, less.
Less down.
Like everyone. So I believe that a nice shirt, which is not t-shirt, can be great. And again, it's not because it's a Japanese potential client, it's because it's respecting the other side.
And I'm not sure if it was a joke or not, but mid-COVID time, was a Japanese entrepreneur, I think, or a startup that they made like it was a pigeon, but the upper part looked like like a white shirt with a tie. And so they also, like Maytal said, it doesn't matter dress however, feel still respectable but comfortable. And they dress like they'll dress at home.
Yeah,
So
but I would like to add something that when you show a skin in Japan, sometimes it can be different from the Japanese um, people. So depending on the context, and if you want to have a respectful meeting, try to wear something that is not very open and exposed.
I think we will have maybe a separate webinar about how is to be a student in Japan, because if you're talking about dress code, it's completely different. Although students don't have a dress codes in universities, still getting into your lab wearing a spaghetti tank top, it's something that you won't see anyone's doing. And
yes, in Israel, it's the most common thing, but in Japan, not so much.
Not at all. Walking with Crocs, it's like you just got out from the lab to maybe to the restroom, but you don't enter the gate with a Crocs or something like that, or flip flops. No, first time I wore flip flops outside of home, someone came to me. It's like, "Are you going to the beach? It's really late now." I was like, "No, I'm just going for shopping." It's like, "So why are you wearing your beach sandals?" I was like, "What?" Well, it's comfortable. No, it's not even working for shopping.
Wow.
So going back to our last questions, if you travel to Japan, how was the experience in the headquarter? Let's start with Maytal.
So we established our activity in October 2018, and a month later, we all visited the headquarter in Japan. We, of course, were very excited. We were only 1 month old in the company. Of course, we were very excited, and we kind of had many introduction meetings with different business units. Of course, the dress code was very formal, but it's because of us, we felt that we have to respect the idea of meeting the headquarters for the first time and to create a good impression. I think that they were very welcoming. It's the first time they have an Israeli presence, and for some of us, it was the first time visiting in Japan. For me, it was the third. I just came back from my honeymoon in Japan a week before I started working for Sompo. So I think it was great. We were more absorbing what we have heard and seen. So we were more kind of not passive, but we were there to listen and learn about our corporate. And from their side, I can say that they were very welcoming until today, actually. But I had less the cultural shock because it was the third time. Keren-Or, of course, is even more familiar with the culture than me.
Karen, do you want to share your experience with visiting headquarters or Japanese clients at their
yeah, so basically I met a lot of Japanese companies in Israel while I was managing the Israel-Japan Chamber of Commerce, and also Prime Minister and foreign trade executives from the METI Japan and others. And I see here some participants that are kind of familiar from my work then. So nice to see you here in this webinar. But I think when I was visiting Japan in the headquarters, I usually came with a blazer in my bag and kind of a long sleeves shirt, or just a non-exposed, non-skin shirt. And usually when you're a woman in Japan, you have to ask a little bit, I think, it's a good thing to ask if there will be other participants in the meeting and who will they be, because if you are the only women, you have to maybe step up and dress very similar to the men, because sometimes it's a hierarchy and a respect in that matter. But if there are other women, maybe it can be a little bit more loose. So I think depending on the context, but if you come for a first time visit or a few first time kind of connection, yeah, I would recommend to wear something that is respectful. And then when you go in the evening to drink or to eat together, you can remove your blazer and wear something that is comfortable. And it's a sign that the work part of the day is finished, and then you go and you drink and you have fun and you connect as a friend or as a kind of friendly atmosphere, and then you can wear whatever you want.
Thank you very much. You mentioned our hierarchy, and I have a question about hierarchy, and then we will answer some questions that have been asked in the chat. Do you have a hierarchy within the company with the Israeli branch, and if you feel the headquarter hierarchy in the Israeli office?
So our lab is part of the digital division of SOMPO. There are 2 additional labs, actually 2 in Tokyo and 1 in the Silicon Valley, and us. We have our CDO, Mr. Koichi Narasaki, which is one of the executives in all SOMPO holdings. So of course there is a hierarchy, but we don't feel it as much as we're not located in Japan. I believe that over there you can feel it way more, because our role is less depend on the business units. We share ideas with the business units. You know, some are more proactive and some are less. It can be from different reasons. But after all, we are very independent when we want to launch new services or products within this digital division. So we feel it less. But as a very conservative industry, which is the insurance industry, and a Japanese corporate, so of course there is a hierarchy. We see it when there are executives that's visiting in Israel, and each one of them has his own secretary, and they have to visit the hotel in advance, and they have to prepare so many things that they're working with us on. So when they visit Israel, we feel it more. How each kind of detail has to be set and understood because of the high executive that is now visiting out of Japan. But we as a lab, we feel it less.
I think I feel it more when I need to talk, when I need signature on a certain document. And then we need like the higher, like the general manager of a certain business unit or a certain department. I can't just like send him the document or say, here, sign here. I have to go through a certain chain of command to his secretary or to his his helper, and I need to explain what it is and give a specific details and everything. So I feel this is where I feel it more right now, and it's also related to the one of the first question about educated the Japanese or the Israelis, because every little thing have to be explained, like why this date, why is it like that. You can't just say, oh, it doesn't matter the date we put on the document, just sign it and whatever. You have to know it. So this is where I feel it more.
Yeah, cultural organization, right?
Yeah.
Keren, do you want to share us your experience?
Yeah, I can share briefly that it depends on your context, basically. I was working in an Israeli branch of a Japanese large corporation that has 30,000 employees around the world. So we were just 40 people. So yes, they knew that Israelis are sassy and kind of saying whatever they want and innovative, and it's great. But also our CEO, Mr. Arik Dan, which I very much feel appreciated and thankful for the opportunity to work together, is a Japanese MBA graduate. So he studied in Keio University, and therefore he wrote and read and wrote everything, including the legal and very hard technological words in Japanese about robotics and automotive and etc. So he was a very Japanese-oriented human being. He wrote in Japanese, he spoke in Japanese, he lived in Japan for a while, he even raised his kids. So the hierarchy was very natural because it was the same, just in Israel. So when we were talking with the Japanese branch in Israel, it was via Zoom or via video. I think in 2014 or 15, we didn't use Zoom yet, but something else. And it was very clear that even in the space where you sit, if you have several people in the meeting, you have to sit in a certain way, even if you are online. The CEO has to be facing the very, let's say, senior person in the meeting. And then the other people has to sit in the side. So first of all, yeah, it was very obvious. And of course, when you give the meishi, when you give the business card, and you want to face the senior manager or executive or CEO in Japan, then you have to make sure you can address him, because sometimes you cannot address him and you need to ask someone that is higher than you to address him, even in the email. So when you write an email, you first have to write the email to your own superior and make sure this is the right answer or this is the right direction, and then together they send it to the Japanese side. So yeah, I think it was clear in every interaction, and it's very different from Israel.
Thank you very much. So I will try to I have some more questions, but I would like to share some questions from the chat. So Nir asks, how about follow-up culture? Is it appropriate to send reminder after a few days, weeks? And please share your experience. And that's everything.
I think that if you have someone, example, in Israel, if you have like partners in Israel or whatever country you're in, it will be better to do it with them, because we already have business connection with the business units and with the people they met with. Because even when I'll send them a reminder for something, even if it will be like a week later, they will like, oh, give us time, and so we'll know how to play with it, with the reminders, so they won't get angry or feel that they'll be pushed off.
I would add to that in the beginning, I was very hesitating in sending kind reminders to answer my emails. I have witnessed so many cases that I sent an email to one of the business unit and there was no answer for a while. And then after consulting with my colleagues in Japan, which are doing the same, like they're part of the innovation lab in Tokyo, they said, it's fine. Just wait a few days and send it in a very respectful way. So that's what I do. Usually I let them 1 week to answer my email. Well, of course, it depends on the context, etc. But I definitely feel comfortable to send kind reminders. Sometimes there is no change, and sometimes there is. They say, "Oh, I'm sorry for the late response. I'm checking. I'm still exploring." But it's also a matter of education, because as they sometimes expect us to provide answers right away, and I think that our role here is to provide the best service that we can, both for Sompo and also for the startups. So we kind of educating Sompo sometimes to do the same. Like we say, listen, we work with startups. They sometimes need to know an answer, even that it's a no, or we still need time. But we have to keep this communication, the best that we can. So regarding your question here, it's totally fine to send a kind reminder in a very respectful way, and usually it works.
I will add to this from my experience that sometimes when it's in English, if you write someone for a Japanese and it's in English, it's harder to come up with an answer right away. Whether if it was in Japanese and then you just answer. And I guess for me to receive a mail in Japanese, it will go down to my bottom of my to-do list because I know it's harder to tackle, right? So it's something we need to remember. Once you don't write to someone in his native language, it's a bit harder to tackle the email right away, and it takes a bit more time. Maybe you're insecure and you need someone to check it, etc. So it's something we need to bear in mind when we're waiting for an answer. Karen, you wanna explain?
Yeah. So I totally agree, and I think Sompo has a very good connection with their own business unit. So if someone is not answering, I only assume Maytal or Einav feel free to call and say, hi, this is really important for us. We need to see where is this going. Whether the connection, I think, and the context depend if you have a back or if you have a hierarchy or you don't have a hierarchy. So if you're a Japanese entrepreneur or an Israeli entrepreneur trying to connect with the Japanese market, and it was a nice meeting, and they listen to you, and they usually do this nod, right? They listen. It doesn't mean that they say yes, they just listen. And if you are not familiar with the Japanese code and the Japanese business culture and the kind of nuances, I would recommend understanding what's your goal from the meeting. If your goal is just to have first touch base, then it's great. But if you would follow up and you would expect the Japanese side to respond like an Israeli, yes, of course, this is great, let's do it, it's not going to happen. Because the way decisions are being made in Japan is via consensus. So they will not feel open, and they will not feel that they're allowed to give you, a green line, whether they're not yet familiar with you and they haven't met you, and their superior haven't met you. So I think it's a matter of expectation. If you understand that when you follow up, you just follow up and you can very politely ask, how are you doing? It was really nice to talk to you, then it's great. And you can follow up just to keep the connection warm. But if you follow up with a request or a demand after a week, usually it will be challenging for the Japanese side, and usually it takes time. 6 months is fast in Japan timeline. So if you create a connection and after 6 months you have a contract signed or a sales representative or corporation, it's a success. And I would recommend having an expert going along and joining the meeting with you, because if Japanese see another Japanese or experienced person in the meeting together with you, and then they will feel more secure. And then the chances are that they would answer fast than the regular delay. So, yeah.
Yeah, again, it really depends what you expect from the other side. Like if it's a potential customer, it's something else. But if it's your colleague, in my case, for example, so you do want to, to build a relationship that is very, communicative. And usually these kind reminders are very helpful. And if it doesn't work, so it's kind of a sign that it's probably not relevant, which is also fine. And then we as innovation team, we have to communicate it with the startup. And sometimes an answer doesn't have to be yes or no. It can be also, thank you, we are still exploring it. Let's get back to you in a month, because it's very, it's needed when we need to communicate it with the startups. And in probably in near case and others, it's sometimes you don't want to miss the opportunity. So of course it's a question of timing when to send this kind of reminder, but I think that it's totally fine.
I think another thing is what I feel that it helps me when I need to send a reminder is that I don't just follow up or say, okay, did you saw my email? Do you have a reply?
No.
Yeah, I also add a suggestion or a question. Like I'll say, do you need any more information for me? Can I help with something in order to help you proceed with the matter? And it has to be like Keren said, very polite and very respectable. Sometimes when you add like a line or a word in Japanese, they feel
It helps.
Yeah.
feel more
Like
connected.
in the end and in the
Yes,
beginning always helps.
yes. They love it. They love that we try to learn their language, even if it's just hello, goodbye.
Yeah. And I would add that it's just for the advanced, but Nir, if you want, you have a whole jargon of weather greetings. You can write the weather greetings in Japanese. It's a great summer now. It's very warm here. How are you doing? And then add this to your email, and I think it can be a nice opening line for a follow-up.
Even something short in Japanese always show an effort to come towards someone else. It's already make it a professional on one hand, on the other hand, a bit friendly and more convenient for the other side to feel relaxed.
Yeah.
Another question is, do you feel with any language difficulties when it comes to a working language? So if it's with the Japanese engineer team or project team, but not the business team, because we know that business team is more international oriented, but a bit more for the professional teams. Do you find it any language barriers? Maytal, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you. So we usually work with our colleagues in the digital unit in Tokyo, which they speak English pretty well. And they're kind of our tubes, our channels to the business units that sometimes do not speak English that well. So it's kind of a barrier sometimes, but we cope with it. Like we overcome it pretty well. And also, I will say that we learned Japanese for the last 3 years almost with an Israel-Japanese teacher. It's not to handle a conversation and to explain about a technology in Japanese, rather than to be closer to their culture and to respect their culture. But again, most of the conversations are held in English, and it's doable. Even with the basic English, of course, you can handle a conversation, and sometimes we even join an interpreter to the conversation, which helps a lot.
Thank you. Keren, Einav, do you have something to add on it?
Yes. So myself and Adas talked about it last week, that we are Israeli person or Israeli women studying Japanese. And even if we will study Japanese all our lives, the level is going to be different. We are olim chadashim in Japanese if you study the language. And I think it's important to understand that if you want something to be done in a business professional way, then it's okay to bring a professional business Japanese person to support you and we can do the emails and we can talk, but I think the jargon, when you start to talk about cyber or health or biotech, you have a lot of different professional phrases and catchphrases and other expressions. And if you are brave, then you can memorize them. But usually I would recommend just understanding that it's okay to have this gap. Some things you can do in English, some things you can do in basic Japanese, but other things, it's okay to have a support, or if you have a Japanese friend to go over your email and give you an advice if it sounds good or not, then that's the bad thing. But if you don't, then I would recommend just keeping it very short in Japanese so that you would feel comfortable.
Oh, you're muted.
Sorry,
Oh.
that you would feel comfortable expressing yourself. Then if you would feel comfortable, they can understand your body language and they can see that you're comfortable. And if you feel uncomfortable, they would see that you are uncomfortable. And if you are still kind of basic in your Japanese and you don't speak keigo, which is a very formal Japanese, it's okay to have a Japanese translator to join.
And I would recommend to have more than one friend in hand, that you won't get tired. And I think it's very important to remember, especially when we work with the same team, is that people have good days and bad days, and sometimes they are more willing to understand you even if you're not so clear, and sometimes it's just not a good day and they're less. So we need, and again, read the atmosphere, right? Feel the person that you're contact with, and if you see it's not the best day, just let go a bit, try the next day. Sometimes you will benefit from it more. And I think it's the same for us. And if you feel comfortable enough with a person, and I know this is a cultural difference, but this is something that it's beyond cultures. Just say, you know what, today is not the best day. Like, let's try tomorrow, right? And so we shouldn't forget that as well. There's another question, and after that I will have just like the last two questions, if you don't mind. So one is, if you can tell us a bit about the process of decision making in Japan, or and how it's transformed in your work, and how it really happens, and what are the procedures. Let's start with Einav. You want to share?
Honestly, sometimes I don't really understand how they work or think. Like sometimes I feel like I figure it out and then something else happen. And I think it's important for them to have everything clear. If they need to sign something or approve something, everything must be clear, a clear answer and clear decision. And then they run it by their, boss, and only then, after a few weeks or months, we'll get like the answer.
Yeah, I think there's no need to say that it's usually a long process. But I also see some change in that regards, as it's also part of the education and the trust that is being built towards taking a faster kind of decisions. Sometimes, as a corporate, you can miss an opportunity. So you kind of understand that you sometimes have to change your current process of taking decision. So it really depends. There are some strategic decisions that have to be made, and then it will be a longer process. And some are, they can being held more quick. And that's where we enter the picture as an innovation arm of giving the specific business unit the trust to take the decision faster. We build this trust among us, and also with the startup or with a technology provider. So again, it really depends on how strategic this decision is.
Thank you. Keren-Or, do you want to add?
Yeah, I think most of the information about building trust, we already covered this in the first part, but I would just add that decision making in Japan is very thorough. They have to go over every little detail, every little ingredient in the technology. They have to understand the spec, the size, the connection, the volt, I don't know, the code and everything. And if they don't understand every little detail in every little small niche in the technology, many times they will not continue. And Israelis find it threatening sometimes or not relevant to answer these questions. Why should we give you information about our technology, our energy storage unit or whatever? But for Japanese, it's a different mindset. They need to understand. They want to understand everything. Only when they have all the information, all of the data, and I do this because it's a lot of information that they ask. If they have all the data and they feel that this is suitable for their own strategy, then they will continue. And if they don't have some information or you don't want to share this with them, and it's okay to sign the NDA when you share the information, no problem, you can ask them. I can share this with you and sign something. But if you don't share this, sometimes they can interpret this as a disrespect. You don't answer our questions, so we will not continue with you. But if you want to get a Japanese cooperation, investment, strategic relationship, or colleague, then yeah, I think it's important to answer the questions. And you can also ask, why is this important to you? Why do you need to know this? What would help you if I would answer you? And then you can understand why are they asking for these informations. Many times they don't ask the information. They get a request from their manager and they try to fill the gap. And if you understand this, so I think it's a lot easier to get things done. So that's what I can add on decision making in Japan.
Thank you very much. We have a list of questions, but I guess time is up. And maybe in a few months we can continue this session with more questions. I would like to say thank you very, very much for your time and for sharing your experience. It's very valuable. For those that are for a long time in the Japanese-Israeli market, and for those that are considering the future career path, I think your added value is enormous and you had a highly impact on our members. Thank you very, very much. And please continue follow up our messages and we will update our networks, SNS with our next webinar. And thank you very much, Einav, Maytal, and Keren-Or.
Thank
you. And feel free to reach out to us in LinkedIn or other way that you feel relevant for you. I'm happy to answer.
Thank you all for the participants and listeners.